So are you looking into buying a camera, and have you been asking the question, what's going to be the most future-proof option for me? And I know a lot of people have asked me that, and I'm sure I've said it at some point myself, but I actually want to talk about why it's not really helpful or even possible to future-proof your camera, and how I think you should go about it instead.
Could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy.
So what are we talking about when we're saying future-proofing cameras? And a big example a couple years ago was I would hear a lot of people even saying something like, well, I like camera A better, or even I don't like camera B, but I'm going to go with camera B because camera B shoots 4K video and I want my camera to be future-proof. And like a week later, there were mirrorless cameras that were shooting 6K video. And not more than a year later, now we have cameras shooting 8K video. And first of all, I want to say you don't have to be shooting 8K video to be shooting great quality videos. But you also don't necessarily have to be shooting 4K video in order to do that. And that's kind of the point. But the reality is you can't future-proof your gear against tomorrow's technology when you're buying today's technology. If what future-proofing means to you is having the most modern spec, you're always going to be running behind that. And this is not just something in video either. In photography, the entire megapixel war, and even just generally equating higher megapixel count to better image quality, you might not need a higher megapixel count than what you have, or even in some cases, you might want a lower megapixel count that might work better for the things that you're shooting depending on what type of work you do. And of course, there are always specs that you do need to look at because they will be important for you and your work. And I know that it's a lot of stuff to understand and a lot of information to go through. So I'm going to talk about how I think you should go about thinking about which specs you need to pay attention to and what you need to think about when you're purchasing a camera or camera gear. So the first thing is, looking at camera specs is basically the last thing that you should do when making these decisions. The first thing that you need to do is ask yourself, what do I shoot and what will I realistically be shooting over the next few years? And I admit this is easier said than done, and especially if you're a beginner and you don't know what you're going to be shooting, you haven't really specialized or figured out exactly what you want, you just kind of want to generally learn shooting photography and video. But honestly, that's kind of your answer right there. If you're just trying to generally learn shooting photo and shooting video, then what you really need is a general entry-level camera. There's a reason that these exist. It's because they're a good catch-all. They're not going to be great at any one thing, but they're going to do a lot of things reasonably well. And when you are just getting started and learning and you don't have a specialization, then you shouldn't buy something that is a specialized tool. If you are doing professional work, then you will have to think about this a little bit more, but you should also have more experience to rely on. What are the current limitations of your gear? What are you primarily shooting? Where's the majority of your work and the majority of your income coming from? And typically, you're going to want to invest in gear that can handle 80% of the work that you are doing on a regular basis. So if you're shooting mostly sports, then you're going to want to invest in something that can shoot fast burst rate probably, and something that can track fast subjects really well. If you're shooting mostly underwater shots of sea life, then you're going to want to invest more into a really good underwater housing for your camera equipment. If you're shooting mostly in studio portraits or in studio work in general, then you should probably invest more into lighting and quality modifiers. Again, if you haven't discovered your niche or your specialty, then it doesn't make sense to buy specialized tools for a niche or a specialty. And shooting something once doesn't mean that you are going to shoot it enough to really invest in buying specialty equipment for that type of shoot. Because realistically, that's a good way to end up with a bunch of gear that you've only used once and never needed again. And I'm not too proud to admit that I have learned this the hard way and done this before myself. Even once you have found your niche, you don't necessarily need the newest and shiniest and most expensive gear within that field in order to do it. What you need to ask is, what do you need? What features and abilities do you need in order to do your work? What gear can get that work done, and what of that gear fits into your price range that you'll be able to afford and use to make the work that you need to make. And a lot of times older and used gear can accomplish what you need from your gear at a fraction of the cost. And I'll say for me personally, I do have a lot of used gear, and I'm very happy with the used gear that I bought, knowing what I need from that gear. And that gear has made me, in a lot of cases, more money than my newer gear, because the cost of that initial gear was a lot less from buying it used than buying it new. So I made up the price of the gear and then was able to earn off of that gear a lot faster. So then going back to the very idea of what is future-proof, again, the best specs in a camera or on a spec list sheet are not going to necessarily be the most future-proof. The features that you need to get your work done the best and the most consistently are the things that are going to last the longest and be, if there is such a thing, the most future-proof. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you think about going about your next gear purchase? What do you think about the idea of future-proof, and what kind of gear and what things you need to make your stuff the most future-proof for you? If you are looking for any gear, I will have affiliate links in the description below to some of the gear that's my favorite that I like to use a lot. If you purchase through those links at no extra cost to you, it'll help support this channel so that I can continue making videos for you guys. If you haven't yet, think about hitting the subscribe button. Thanks. See ya.
Gotta focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell, keep your head down, find what you love and excel, yeah. Push and pull and repel any hate, go create what you want, feel compelled, yeah.